Let me introduce Sandra Begay, who is just it's a pleasure to introduce. We didn't know whether it should be me or Ramiro because Sandra is a fellow Sandia. She's been there many years. She's the daughter of a native Navajo tribal leader, a public health nurse. She's an engineer and she's been at Sandia for 9 years and she works there as an engineer and runs great programs, but she's also very involved and leads some of our community outreach programs. But she also is very involved with UNM. She's on the UNM Board of Regents as the board secretary and treasurer. And she's brings 18 years of unique experience as a technical advisor to US tribes. And she's been featured in the American Society of Engineers book, Changing Our World, True Stories of Women Engineers. So we're going to have her speak to us about diversity, inclusion, equity, and justice, and some of her thoughts on how we can build on these themes in our peace engineering efforts. So thank you, Sandra, for being with us today.
Thank you, and thank you for being very flexible with the schedule. I really appreciate that. So Yate Bennett, good morning. I come from the Church Rock area of Navajo Nation, which is on the eastern side, on the New Mexico side of Navajo. Those of you who are familiar with the Four Corners area and the state line area, we tease on Navajo that Church Rock is the cash cow of Navajo Nation because we had the first casino that was put on Navajo tribal lands. Everybody has various opinions about casinos, but for tribal nations, should they decide to go into that type of business, it's been very lucrative and they've been able to set aside money for projects such as renewable energy development. And I'll give you a few examples of that in a minute. So being part of the Navajo Nation, I need to elaborate a little bit more on my credentials. On Navajo, we're not allowed to have people just get up in the public and give presentations. You have to give a little bit of credentials. So I've been an engineer for 33 years and it doesn't seem that long. I've been at Sandia for 29 and almost 30 years. I've been very fortunate to have a job since 2002 to work for the Department of Energy's Tribal Energy Program, and it has evolved into the Department of Energy's Indian Energy Program, which was created by the 2005 Energy Policy Act. With that role, I've been able to give technical assistance to tribes across the United States, and I was very fortunate to do energy planning with tribes, and I was able to do about 16 different tribal strategic energy plans within a year and a half, almost 2 years. So being able to go to tribal lands all across the United States to help them further their mission and their vision and actually get down to a 2-year plan and a 90-day plan. So when we talk about tribal nations, we have to go back to the theme, and what you're discussing today is peace engineering. So if we take a historical context to peace in the United States, the tribes that were indigenous to the United States went to war with the colonialists and the people who wanted to take over the land. And that history became conflicts and wars, the Indian Wars. The only way they were settled through a peaceful means was through treaties. And so these treaties are long-standing. For the Navajo Nation, it's 1868. Each tribe will tell you the exact date of when they have a treaty. And we expect the federal government, the tribes, I am not a tribal official, but as a member, I understand this, we expect the federal government to live up to their negotiating terms of their peace treaty with the tribes. What does that mean today? It is a matter of the federal government recognizing the tribes as sovereign nations. So they deal with tribes in a different manner because of those treaties. The sovereignty of the tribes helps them pursue their governmental goals, but it also leads to the tribal leaders being able to go to the president, Congress, directly to them. They don't have to go through any other agency, any other state. They have direct access to the White House and to Congress. With that being said, there's another historical piece with infrastructure that I think really lends itself to today's discussion. That as the United States evolved as a country, it would have been the Rural Electrification Act back in the 30s and 40s that was a big boost up to rural communities in the United States. Many of the rural co-ops, the cooperative electrical service units, were created and served our rural communities, counties, very small towns. Well, the problem that occurred with Indian countries, they skipped over the Indian territories, the reservations. Why? We can only guess. It was too difficult to negotiate, or it never occurred to them to put their efforts onto the reservation. So you've got since the 1940s, let's say, till 2021, where there still continues to be very minimal infrastructure on certain very rural reservations. So today I'll illustrate what happens on Navajo Nation. Navajo, as you might know, is the largest land-based tribe in the United States, also large in census count or number. We tend to be nomadic, traditional lifestyle with herds of livestock, sheep and cattle, moving across the land with the herds to wherever they wanted to graze. So being nomadic, they would live in clusters, mostly around the woman of the family, because we're a maternal tribe. And these families would just live on their ancestral lands where they were born or where their family lived, mostly based where the women resided. So how does that affect today? Many of the rural citizens of Navajo do not have electricity and don't have running water and don't have indoor plumbing. So this should take a lot of people by surprise. So 2 hours from Albuquerque, New Mexico, going to an area like Church Rock, which has uranium mine tailings and a lot of critical needs for environmental justice, there are communities that still do not have the necessary infrastructure. So how I connect this in my mind about peace is that in order for the history of the United States to mitigate the needs of the tribal communities, they have to live up to their treaties. And so when you hear today about EJ 40, environmental and energy justice, 40% of federal dollars that are allocated to the different agencies must be in concert or in partnership with communities in need. So for my work, we go directly to the treaty rights and the ways of dealing with tribes, that is a very natural way to get funding to these communities in need. Specifically on Navajo, when I got started in this work in 2002, Senator Bingaman from New Mexico heard the need and wanted to support the Navajos with solar units. And the money, and more of an experiment, was given to very small units, a couple of solar panels and a lead acid battery, very, very small. It evolved to today where they have about 3,000 watts at the biggest system, 3,000 watts per day, 3 kilowatt system that comes with a refrigerator. And what the issue today is getting enough of these units out into the field. Now, could you think of this as a world or global model? Maybe. I've written a paper about that this notion of drag and drop, plug and play electrical units could be done in different countries. The way the Navajo Tribal Utility formed their model was to put lead acid batteries in a battery bank, metal box, put it on metal skids, built a frame, put the solar panels on tilted to 2 different angles for the winter and the summer, and then had all the wiring done. The home would be ready for the electrical service. So you drag that with a truck and a trailer, drop it and connect it, and then people have power. These would be very rural citizens. I have sets of interns that I've had since 2002, and I deliberately take them out to Navajo to show them how far you have to drive from one home to the town where they could get groceries. And so when we talk about humanity and security for families, the level of need for basic electricity still remains today. And I believe if you'll watch where the infrastructure bill comes into play, they may be able to address this problem in a fashion that helps rural tribal communities, not just Navajo, receive basic power. And for me in the chat, I've noticed about humanity and looking at security from families. And I think this is one way it's been addressed right here in the United States with tribal nations. I read papers where you connect electricity with refrigeration that makes health outcomes better because you may have fresh food, you could have insulin refrigerated, These are basic needs that many people already have and take for granted, but we still have to solve these problems in Indian country in order for them to thrive. Now, the other example may be larger tribes that have gaming. What they're trying to do is trying to make their infrastructure sustainable, more green building, lots of solar panels. They're moving into energy storage at large scale. So there's ways as a sustainable and resiliency effort that I've seen where you see these systems going into place for microgrids, that if the grid goes down, they're able to keep the lights on. The best example that I'll end with today is the Blue Lake Rancheria in Northern California. They had a Wall Street Journal article, one of the New Year's days, several years ago, with the climate changing and the forest fires in California. They were ravaged in that area where PG&E shut down the power in order to try to mitigate any more fires. Well, the fires came so close that they shut off the power. In that region of Northern California, the only lights that were on were at Blue Lake Rancheria, and they prepared for this. They knew that they would be the Red Cross designated area, emergency response area. Their hotel was up and running with their microgrid, their station where you could get gas and in groceries was open. And so it supplied that type of need, emergency need for the community, not just the tribal community, but the whole region came into Blue Lake Rancheria to be able to sustain what they needed through food, gas, and maybe even shelter if they needed. So I wanted to leave that example that we have different models on tribal nations across the United States, and I can see the tie of peace from the treaty obligations with the federal government on top of the initiatives today, where we talk about resiliency and looking at how do you meet the human needs, basic needs of tribal citizens in order for them to not survive, but to thrive. And I think if we keep a good eye on what's happening and developing, you'll see some great outcomes. So I think they do come together hand in hand about the similar issues of when you talk about peace and how do you help people have their basic needs met, then we can see how that outcome through technology and the way we put in basic electricity can be very helpful. I'll leave you with the last illustration. So there is an ambassador for Navajo Nation. Her name is Miss Navajo. There's a very elaborate contest that she has to go through. My fellow colleague is a civil engineer. She got her master's degree from Stanford University, and she became Miss Navajo. And she and I had a very interesting discussion. She said, Sandra, you keep wanting to push this technology out to the rural traditional areas. What if they don't want the electricity? They want to live their traditional lifestyle because that's what makes them Navajo. I said, I'm not pushing technology. What I do want to have is the question is posed to them. Do you want to have electricity or not? Right now, that's not always the choice. It's always by cost. And some people just cannot afford the cost of running a line and pole, and solar may be their alternative. I said, the premise of this is allowing them to choose what they need so they can live where they want. That's what I think is the part of peace. Have people live where they have traditional lands to live the lifestyle they choose and to be able to make those decisions based on a technical choice. So this is a very viable option to use clean energy, these type of units to be able to support basic needs of electricity.
What excites you? What do you want to work on?
Or, well, you know, I'm doing my dream job right now. So I just really, I really have to laugh that the initiatives right now are just so relevant to helping peoples and communities in need. We have all of the good technology. I think we just need the connection to people and build that trust with the communities that we serve. I know we have goodwill and we want to help, but I really do think making that relationship stronger as to why you want to help. I mean, we know how to help, we have the tools, but I've seen examples where you come in and say, I know what to do. Here's the funny one. I'm from the government tribe. I'm here to help. Or Alaska Village, I'm here to help. It's like, uh-oh, we just stepped back several decades. I'm really here to help, but I want to hear what your needs are. What are your challenges? Because we could have all types of scenarios or technologies that could be of support of the community's goals. And it may not be that difficult of a problem. But what I think is kind of keeps me up at night is that it's the need is here. It has to be done quickly because climate change is affecting all of us, but in those vulnerable communities, it's hitting harder and deeper. If it's a drought, if it's having no fish, if it's too much water, if it's having to move villages because the water is rising, that's all happening now. If it's wildfires in California, if it's rising.
Sandra, thank you. Yeah, I think I really appreciate those comments. I think we all do. I believe George had a specific question for you. Is that right, George?
Yeah, so thank you. So Sandra, it's good to see you. I mean, I've loved interacting and appreciated your perspectives over so many years. The thing that I just feel like you can help us see is you spoke to this. It's like goodwill, but from outside can actually set us back. And yet we have, the wolf is at the door, if you will, in terms of some of these situations. And is there a pathway that you would recommend in terms of finding the people, the communities that have folks inside that have trusting relationships with people outside that would be logical pathways that we could kind of let's explore this where we don't have to build the relationships. We figure out how we can work in this hybrid inside outside kind of way. And then how do we build relationships where we don't have them already?
I think the goodwill is the starting point. You have to have that. Otherwise, there's other problems that you can take on, right? We have a whole society full of challenges, but the goodwill is great. That's a starting point. I think trying to get to know those who've made some strides with projects, that could be from the technical side, the national lab side, or the tribes themselves. So one resource, I think, if you're very interested in Indian country, is look at the Department of Energy's Indian Energy website, and they have projects going back, I'm going to say at least 10, 12 years. And it has a snapshot of where that tribe is, what they've been working on. Most times there's a point of contact, and that would be a good starting point. So if your technology is dealing with solar, look at the California tribes. It's logical for that. If you're looking at maybe more forest type of biomass, look at the tribes that have a lot of forests, and they're leading some of the initiatives for carbon credits with their forest. Menominee tribe up in Wisconsin, I mean, they've had hundreds of years taking care of their forests. It's so pristine. You can see it from the aerial satellite views. Some of that is sort of the homework you have to do to see what resource they may have, but the will of the people may be reflected in a project they've already done, or maybe what they want to do next. So one of the things at Sandia we're looking at specifically is those tribes that have put in a solar system per se. The next stage they may want to be is microgrids. There's a leg up because they have some of that hardware in place, and then you want to add storage. Well, we might have programmatic means to help them. The others through partnerships. I'll just give you an example. There's a great industry partner called Grid Alternatives, and their approach has really been successful. They'll come in with the hardware, and they'll actually do the teaching of the tribal members to put up the solar panels, either on homes or community installations. So there's some great private partners out there that you could see from Indian Energy's website. That might be a start to say, here's some success you built on. Now I have some ideas that could enhance what you're already doing rather than starting from scratch. Always look at how do you enhance what's being done.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like asset-based development, focusing on what you have instead of what you don't have. And you think that from a trust perspective, if I contacted someone that I didn't know, but I'd done the due diligence to kind of research what I could find on the web through the Office of Indian Energy or other publications, that would help mitigate or overcome that thing that you said, like, hey, I'm from the government, I'm here to help, because I am from the government and I am here to help.
Right.
But it would keep the wrong interpretation of that at distance. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome for your time today.
Sandra, thank you so much. Can you provide in the chat your contact information and how we can continue to have people engage with you in a dialogue about how to use your experience to help inform our police engineering. Would that be acceptable to you?
That would be very acceptable. My own
Okay.
funny request is that if you want to talk to me about technology, please send it to Sandia and not show up at the UNM public meetings and ask me about that at that.
Okay. Guys, all heard about that. So
Question.
Sandra, look to the chat for her contact information, and please do join us for the discussion if you can.